Welcome to the Mortal Realms, an Age of Sigmar story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar.
What?
Your allies through the realm gates this evening are...
Was it me? All right, well, this is Aaron, and I'm bringing you Malign Portents.
My name is Paul, and did you hear about the evil Treeman sailors who always sailed left? People called them Malign Portents.
And this is Eric with his misaligned porpoise. In this episode, we're discussing the unprecedented collection of Malign Portents stories published by Games Workshop on malignportents.com. We'll be sharing our favorites, discussing some overarching themes that you can see if you take a step back and look at the whole collection. If you're watching us on YouTube, looking like idiots miming in front of the camera, please like and subscribe to the channel.
I don't know who you're talking about.
If you're listening on your favorite podcast where you're saved from watching us do the miming, please leave a review on iTunes. Share this episode on social media so we can introduce more people to the Age of Sigmar lore. How are you tonight, gentlemen?
Really good, though. My house has been invaded.
Yep.
What?
So we're
Yeah.
this is our first time being invited over to Aaron's house to record.
To be clear, you were not invited.
Ever. Especially since little June being born.
Oh yeah.
And the remodeling of this space. So this is not just Aaron's hobby space. He also works here.
Well, I mean, working hard or hardly working, right?
Yeah. Also, the lock is on the outside of the door, I noticed. So
that really helped during my wife's maternity leave.
So Aaron is trapped in here. We may be trapped in here.
I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me.
You're not wrong.
So what have you guys been up to? Working on anything in the hobby or with all the, Age of Sigmar 2.0 coming out? What have you guys been up to?
I have been working on my Seaguard army slowly.
Ooh.
Getting the base colors down on my Sea Helm and my Merworm. So
cool.
Merworm?
All that interesting.
Merworm?
Merworm with Sea Lord.
Getting ready for
Merworm
them.
with Sea Lord.
Getting ready for them to deliver letters in the mortal realms.
Yeah, my Elven Postman.
Sure.
Your Merworm Melon?
Merworm Melon.
That's all.
Say that
all
3 times fast.
You thought the puns were done.
Yeah.
No.
And how's that been going? You've been has building that in Age of Sigmar 2 been good, or does the new edition have any bearing on whether or not you're building this or not?
No, new edition has nothing to do with it.
True.
I think it'll be fun. I've been working on it for a while. I had it to the base colors, and I haven't taken it forward, so I'm just painting up a couple more models to get them to the base colors so I can start finishing them off.
Sure.
I rebased them all, but that's about it.
Cool.
Is the Merworm is that part of that like allegiance or alliance, or how does that work?
So not anymore. Technically, a Merworm, according to Forge World, at least in the old updated scrolls, which might be changed within the next week, is a destruction monster.
Oh.
So therefore, I cannot use it.
We get it.
In an order faction.
Dibs.
But in the old lore for the old world. The Lothern Sea Guard
I've heard
had an army in Storm of Chaos, and in Storm of Chaos, they had Merworms that they were allowed to field.
Okay.
Merworm.
But they weren't Merworm mailmen. They were just Merworms. And they're Merworm male elves, aren't they?
And females.
And female elves. But
we don't discriminate.
So Merworm male neutral or elf.
Merworm male person.
Fair enough.
It's 2018.
So because of that, I decided I wanted to
Wait a minute.
nice.
Aaron, are you establishing a timeline for the Mortal Realms?
Yeah.
Is that the Age of Myth? Is that the Age of Sigmar? Like, what's going on here? You're confusing our timeline.
It's my own, there's the Gregorian calendar. Like, this is the Age of Aaron. Like, that's how I measure time.
Are you like a chaos god? Or are we like, what's going on here?
I don't have to answer that question.
Well, that's fair. But I did decide I wanted a centerpiece for my Sea Guard army. And so I converted my Merworm to have a little stand platform for my Sea Lord to stand on it.
Okay, cool.
So it fits in very well with the look of the rest of it, and it fits in with the sea theme and etc.
Is it a counts as something? A dragon?
Yeah, I'm probably going to just have it counts as something on dragon to ally into the army.
Right on.
So
I wonder if we're going to see a lot of those like in deep kit armies. I guess I didn't really put 2 and 2 together.
That'd be rad.
I
would be
mean, I
cool.
guess if they're really destruction, that's hard to. But still,
Well, that's a keyword change.
sure, too true.
Make it order.
Mhm.
Make it mirrorworm.
Are you going to order them to be order? Or are you going to order them to be destruction?
I'll ask them nicely.
Yeah, you're real kind and generous soul. In terms of what I'm working on, I think I said it last time. I'm really just filing all the miscellaneous little dudes that I got, like unrelated to any particular army, in this display case. But so no real rhyme or reason as to what's getting done. But I got the plastic put together.
There's something therapeutic about not having a rhyme or reason for a little bit. Yeah. I'm just kind of like, do you feel like any of that's associated with the waiting on the new release to finalize and all that kind of stuff?
Maybe, yeah. Trying to have like a cleaner slate. I mean, by no means am I going to be done by the time it drops, but somewhat closer to that.
Define with done with what?
Done having all the models on sprues put together.
Okay.
That will be my definition.
That's the goal.
Don't look at us in the room.
That's your 2018 goal.
That's so Russian a little bit. That's a little too quick.
That's my 30s goal right there. Yeah. Ending soon. Ending quick. Yeah.
Oh man, you're just overachiever.
Also over the hill, but there's that too. Hey, tell me about what you're doing for me.
Oh man, so obviously you'd think so. There's so much new cool stuff in Age of Sigmar 2. There's new spells,
Sacrosanct.
Yeah, there's these new models.
Oh yeah, there's all this amazing stuff.
And there's magic, and you'd think, wow, you've been playing death for a year. Maybe you want to, do death with their summoning their magic. Also, there's a bunch of new cool stuff. And
so, which of all that stuff that you just said are you going to New York?
Buster Ogres.
That wasn't.
I don't even know if they're going to survive. Maybe they're going to go Legend someday. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I've just, for some reason,
yours are already legendary.
For some reason, I wanted to go back to my Ogre-nids, my Tyrannid and Ogre kind of mashup.
Conglomeration.
Caravan of destruction and eating.
Sorry. In that order.
A smashing. Oh gosh, a Smashingsborg.
Smashingsboard. Life is a veritable Smashingsboard.
Smashingsboard. Okay, they'll allow it. Yeah.
Davey, you listening?
Oh, I'm sorry, Davey. You're happy you're not here.
You think he listens? No.
So I started putting them together so I could get them back on the table. Some of the points are dropping in that army. So it's weird. Points drops don't always with the destruction get you more models in, but I think it opens it up for some endless spells and stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's small door that opens with those point reductions.
Or command points, right? That's the thing.
Yep, command points. So I actually played my first game of AOS 2 today against some Tzeentch change hosts. And the thing that I thought was going to throttle my clock was not the thing that throttled my clock. And so
is that a phrase?
How do you throttle a clock?
The thing I thought I throttled my clock was going to be a lot of magic, but it ended up being a blue scribe zipping around on the board, summoning things in the backfields and wherever one. So some target priority on Tzeentch. Pro tip right here: kill the blue scribe.
Man. And we don't normally talk about a lot.
No. But this is definitive. It's good. So that's what I've been doing. I've been working on that. But I've also been doing, as I mentioned last time, some more commissions and drawing and which has been fun doing some characters, people in the mortal realms, etc. And yeah. So, but definitely been excited with all the releases of Age of Sigmar 2.0. I painted up a Knight of Shrouds, the mounted Knight of Shrouds for our local.
Mm-hmm. Is that finished? Did you do that?
It's finished. That was a lot of fun.
Is it based?
It is finished. Oh no, it's not based. That's Tony's going to take care of that. But it was cool to just play with the different textures. The bone on the horse being a little more spectral, the skin on the horse and the cloth on the Knight of Shrouds being more, I guess, textural, and then the heavy metal of his helmet. Like, how would that even float in there, and the sword and all that kind of stuff. So just playing, metal versus fabric and then, ethereal stuff. So that was really cool.
Cool. Did you do anything different? Anything out of the ordinary?
No, I painted it kind of to the store's kind of paint scheme, but thought it could be cool to do something like the cloth as like burlap sacks, like is like a really like they didn't even have Nagash didn't even give them like good cloth.
Sure.
Like he wanted their soul, their spirit to itch. Right?
Mine does that sometimes too.
Like just even thinking about burlap.
Yeah.
So and then maybe like black iron, like super heavy and dark for like the chains and the locks that they're swinging around and stuff,
right.
with just like little bits of rust.
Sure.
Not like, although I thought with your grot scudlers with that heavy rust, it could be really cool to. That would work really good with the kind of a blue ethereal or something to that effect. Or
you mean like how I'm getting 2 starter
wait a
sets
minute,
Nighthaunt and going to be painting them up in that kind of idea?
What?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing what you do there, because I think again, each of those, like every single model has like multiple textural elements that can be fun to play with. But,
yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun.
All right, well, we gushed over AOS models and stuff last time, but yeah, so that's what I've been up to, just trying to also kind of get back to old models, build them, paint them, but
feels good.
Yeah, it's nice. So,
and then
should we start talking about some Malign Portents?
I thought porpoise is what.
Misaligned porpoises.
Okay, there you go.
No, Malign Portents.
Sure. Well,
Portents, trees.
Yeah, there you go. You got it. It only took 20 minutes.
Well, I didn't get, but
I mean, audience.
So, what did you guys think?
You all got it, didn't you?
We've had almost 50 stories.
Jeez Louise. That's
since February.
Sure. Is that what it was? Yeah.
January even? No, January. What was your guys' impression when Malign Portents came out, when they said, "Hey, we're going to be putting on a story every 2 stories a week, 3 stories a week"? What was your first impression on that?
I was like, yes, please. It sounded amazing. We've gotten fiction in White Dwarf in the past. We obviously get fiction in the Battle Tomes. We get fiction in Black Library. We've got it in a lot of different places before. But number one, it's never been free per se. And number two, it hasn't been current era necessarily, especially what Malign Portents has done. And what the really interesting thing to me is that it has moved the story forward. We don't really get that, right? The closest thing we got to that was Storm of Chaos in the Old World before we got to the End Times. And Storm of Chaos kind of went backwards after it happened. So it was amazing to watch the narrative develop. And it went straight from the last box that we got of the Nurgle and the Knight Zephyros straight into this new box set that we have. We transitioned from the last starter to the new starter, and that's kind of an interesting and really cool idea to me.
Yeah, no, I thought it was ambitious. It was there's a new website for it. They gave you a bunch of like, hey, we're going to talk about the different realms. Partway through, well, so initial impressions, like I thought it was great. I mean, I like the idea of short stories. I like the idea of that format. You talk a lot about we've had a lot of different formats of storytelling. This was the first time we had really short form, but it was enough where you could easily take a minute, read it, and have some story sitting in your head for the day. And you didn't know, again, kind of like the rumor mill stuff, kind of like when you read in a tome, you get these little hints of things. You're like, wait a minute, is that going to be a thing?
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that got previewed way before we saw models or had confirmation of something. And maybe that means that there could be some confirmations hidden in there that we haven't seen yet. So, Aaron, being illiterate,
sure.
What did?
But I really appreciate you guys reading them to me. Like that's your good deed for the year. My first impression was that there's no way they're going to be able to keep this up. Like I'm amazed that we've gone this far. I mean, not to sell them short or anything, but like the fact that we've had very interesting. I mean, I don't know that there's been a dud in the bunch. I'm normally pretty critical about stuff like that. But yet each one, it comes out with a new perspective, a new angle, even if it's sort of repeat characters that they're coming at them in a new tenses and in new areas. So I'm surprised that they've been able to fire on these cylinders for so long. I to this day don't know how long they're going for. Like, are we almost done, or like how's that work?
It's going to be done soon.
Okay.
From what I remember, and if I recall correctly, Phil Kelly was on Warhammer Live, and he
Sure.
said there is a certain amount, and we're getting towards the end.
Okay.
So I think we might be on the last few stories, because
Okay.
there was a point at which they would stop.
Sure. Well, and like the release of 2.0 would probably be a great place to do it.
Exactly.
But one of the things I think I mentioned in previous episodes maybe is I love seeing the ramifications of larger events, but on a small scale. And that's this to a T, right? To see not countless, 50 or whatever perspectives on dealing with the current events of the time, and this being the Soul Wars. Because oftentimes I find myself thinking, right, well, there's this big thing going on. How do the Grots feel about it, or how do the Fire Slayers feel about it, and how's it affecting them?
Mhm.
And I mean, very few people or very few races or armies have been left out at this point. I feel like if you're checking boxes, almost everyone's been referenced.
Mhm.
So that's real cool. And again, first impression, I never would have thought that it would have sprawled to this level.
Mhm.
And I'm all for it. And plus, I love the bite-sized stuff. I can read on my phone, while I'm eating breakfast or something. So
Mhm.
that's nice too.
Yeah, I think one of the really fascinating things about these short stories is they have completely changed the tone of Age of Sigmar, right? This wasn't a book that was released. Malign Portents has its own book, and it had its own story, but that told a very specific story in a very specific place.
True.
What these stories have done is they have transitioned the whole range, as far as I'm concerned, from what it was, which is chaos coming in and destroying everything, which is what has always been the narrative, right? In the old world, chaos is going to come in and destroy everything, right? In AOS, chaos is going to come in and destroy everything. And we've heard about these other times when that wasn't the case. This is the first time that we have a point where chaos isn't going to win, right? Chaos is losing. They
Don't tell chaos players
lost ground, and we are having a different villain show up, right? Like, Nagash has always been there, but he was in the old world. He was in his own specific area. He never really became this world-dominating threat. There was always the idea that he could be.
Don't tell End Times Nagash that.
But even then,
No, I'm kidding.
he wasn't a world-ending threat because it wasn't him who ended the world, right? And so we have transitioned from what we knew. So even like the little strings that we held on to from the old world of, oh yeah, it's chaos. Chaos is going to destroy everything. Chaos is going to end the world. Everything is terrible. And we had order fighting back, but like chaos is still holding on to most things. And now we have another player who came in and over the course of these stories has taken control over everything, is defeating everyone, right? That is very much the theme of these stories. Nothing good is going on. Everything bad is going on.
If you're a Death player, I feel like this is pretty great.
But
I love it.
Yep. I mean, that's kind of subjective. If you think that Nagash
Oh,
is good,
actually,
or if you think Sigmar
You bring
is
up a good point. No good person would play Death. Okay, you're valid. All right.
But what we also have is we have a complexity, right? It's not just one motivation, right? It's not destruction versus nothing. We have this actual, genuine exploration of why does Nagash want what he wants?
Yep.
This actual exploration of why does Nurgle want what he wants? Why does Khorne want what he wants? And saying why this is different, why this is wrong, why this is new. And that's a constant informed viewpoint in these stories.
Well, yeah, like you said, I mean, we have been used to a very black and white chaos versus everybody,
like a life and death.
And even AOS at the beginning in the Age of Myth, talk about the Pantheon, and that's what it was, chaos versus everyone. But that couldn't last forever. There's too many differences within the Pantheon and what people wanted, and then even in like taking the Pantheon for granted, or the power of the hatred for chaos for granted, in that it would keep everybody together. And so
enemy of my enemy
situation. Yeah. And so what's been interesting is I know that there's this idea of waxing and waning of the chaos gods. But within the storytelling and what Games Workshop is setting up with this is that there's ability to wax and wane who the protagonist and antagonist is, and to give different armies their spotlight. I mean, as a Death player, having Death and Nagash being the big bad for a little bit has been really fun.
Well, sure, yeah.
And so being able to, do, all of last year was a lot of this, Who will be victorious? Only the faithful. And you know what? We're not hearing so much of that anymore because Nagash is all in all is Nagash.
Sure.
Right?
Well, and the other really fascinating thing is that, like, this is the culmination of something that has been going on since the Age of Myth, right? We hear about this story, and we started in the Malign Portents book about every skeleton bringing a single grain of sand, and we're hearing the resolution in these free short stories, and that's awesome, right? Like, you should get the book because the book is awesome, the book is beautiful, and the story is great, but you don't need the book with these short stories to understand what's going on, right? Nobody's being left behind. And that's a really interesting, different perspective that we have. We have Warhammer Live, we have the Stormcast podcast now. We're getting up to date on all these things. But if you want to find out what's going on yourself, we have a venue that transitioned you from basically AOS 1.0 to AOS 2.0. And it's not just a transition of rules, it's a transition of viewpoints. It's a transition of motivations.
Transition of logos.
Yeah, transition of logos. We're going from the War of Chaos to the Soul Wars.
Well, what's cool about this format, curious to think what you think is cool.
Hit me.
But that we get to,
Really hit me.
that instead of, hey, here's Malign, like we got a book, Malign Portents, we got to read and recap like what Nagash's goals are and what he's trying to do and who the players are and what they're about. We know, Nagash is building up this black pyramid and what's it going to do. But what I think was cool about this format and this kind of slow drip and it being free is that like everyone's getting these little reveals at the same time.
Yeah.
But there's a delayed kind of reveal of things.
Sure. Delayed payoff.
And so, the first time there were some events that happened in these stories that rippled through the community. And so being able to experience that all together at the same time or within 24 hours of each other, right? Instead of like, I picked up Malign Portents and I read it day one and somebody else is going to pick it up next week and is going to read it 2
weeks before release, right? Like, especially in this era of having playtesters get stuff early, hearing about what's going to go on, people getting review copies.
It is fun being like on the same pages.
Yeah.
Like it's fun.
Oh, it's a shared experience. Yeah,
exactly. Like everybody's on the same page because nobody gets early access. Everybody reads it when it's released if they want to, and everybody talks about it. Like it is this immediate, like as far as I'm concerned,
everyone
joining of the community, right? It is a community experience to read these stories, and that's awesome.
Sure. I mean, prime example is the Seraphine. I don't think we're going to get into that one, but the Seraphine one is like textbook. That is, I mean, how much discussion evolved from the release of that story. I mean, even for days, like after the fact.
Well, and it's like 2 paragraphs, right? It legitimately is only 2 paragraphs that caused all the
very end. Lizards come flowing out of a vat.
Sure, yeah.
Or out of the spawning pool, and they're like, oh, they're real things.
Yeah.
And that flipped the script on what we were all talking about. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of digging back into the old Seraphon stuff and content and whatever.
Reevaluation.
And it was really cool.
What we thought we knew.
So it definitely had it. So what did you think? Any things like that popped out? I apologize. You brought that up. So good job.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mission accomplished. I'm gonna lean back and.
Do you have anything else to add, Aaron?
Let you guys carry the show. I like Paul's point to the transition and the fact that we all sort of follow along as time goes on. We're fortunate or unfortunate, it depends how you look at it, that we read a lot of the books so that we can very closely follow Black Library's authors' takes on current events and what's going on. But even so, a lot of those are just microcosms and reactionary towards like the greater story at large. These are uniquely situated to allow us to sort of chart a path alongside the story and sort of ride it to its logical conclusion, or however you want to put it. So because of that, like I especially like them, but also for all the reasons that we've listed so far as well.
All right, so do we kind of had a couple ideas for the format. Either we want to spend some time talking about we want to spend some time talking about our favorites.
Sure.
I also want to spend some time talking about some of these themes that we touched on. Before we get into that, similar to our other regular story phases, What would be a review? What would you say is, for somebody who, before we get into spoilers and talking about our stories, for somebody who hasn't read through these, maybe has picked out one or two, what would you recommend them coming to the malignportents.com website, reading these stories? And if so, what would be your approach? What would you tell them? How would you tell them to approach this collection?
Sure, that's a good question. For me, I definitely recommend reading them. And I don't know, dear listener, I don't know when you're listening to this, but if it's any time before 2.0 releases, I'd get on them maybe ahead of time, because once 2.0 does drop, I feel like we're going to get dumped with a lot more information of post Malign Portents. So if you want to be informed about what we're dealing with going into it, read them sooner rather than later. Get out there. In fact, pause this podcast and go out and give them a shot. But how would you tackle them? I mean, you could read them just straight on through. I feel like that's what most people have done just from an order perspective. But maybe that's not the best way to go about it. You could try and find the ones related to your favorite army, like to sort of build those ties and give you a better take on what your army is doing in this particular setting. So that's one way to approach it. I don't know, how would you guys like tackle it if you hadn't read any of them before?
I personally would start from the first story and move forward.
Sure.
Because some of the stories are sequential.
Sure.
And you get a better appreciation if you watch it from one to the other. And as I mentioned before, we start out at the very end of the last box set, and we end at the very beginning of the next one.
True.
There is a definite narrative thrust to it.
But you wouldn't have to, though. I mean, a lot of them do
right?
follow, but not necessarily all of them.
But the vast majority of them are standalone stories that tell of a moment in time, and that's another really interesting aspect about this, right? If you want to read 5 of them, you're going to understand everything that's in the 5 of them, right? A lot of the Black Library stories have this continuing narrative, and you kind of got to figure out where it fits in here, or
Thanks a lot,
it's this
Reynolds.
Character. Well, it's great because he actually develops the character. But if you were to read the 3rd book about the Hallowed Knights, it wouldn't necessarily have the same impact if you hadn't read the 1st and the 2nd.
True.
Right? But the other thing is that a lot of the themes, a lot of the characters, a lot of the settings of those novels are in these short stories. I mean, we can look at different aspects of it, but one of the things that is very specific is there was mentions of a specific city and marsh striders in one of the short stories that was released. It was, I think, the Witch Hunters one.
So you're starting to get into the themes.
Well,
don't go there.
I'm not going into that theme. I'm going into a different theme. Okay. So,
but that's what I say is talk more broadly about your approach. Don't go into spoilers yet. Talk more broadly about how you approach.
About the plot. What I'm talking about is, if you read about the short story and you read about marsh striders, they are mentioned otherwhere in the fiction, right? These are very much hooks to help you to enjoy the moment and enjoy the story, but also to say, hey, this seems kind of cool. I wonder if I can find more information about this. And the answer is 99% of the time, yes, you can find more information about this.
That's a Paul Wagner guarantee right there, 99%.
99%.
I'm going to hold you to it.
99% of the time, it works 100% of the time.
More worms.
More person, male, than elves.
Nope. Nailed it. What are your thoughts, Eric?
So, I don't know if you want. Do you want me to put you on the spot? Do you want me to put you on the spot?
No, I just turned it on you. What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, by the time you listen to this, there'll be a spreadsheet on our website.
Oh God, no!
Oh man, that is on the spot. Was that fair? I don't know if that was fair.
The point you're bringing this up. Okay.
So I do think that as a starting spot, because you may not be able to start from the beginning to the end, and part of what was nice for us as it was going is that you just had to deal with one at a time. If you have to deal with the whole thing, right, it may not be that interesting after the fact. You might read the AOS 2.0 and go back and it's the old news, some of it, right? It's not as mysterious.
Sure.
So I would certainly go and find maybe the faction that you're interested in, or
I already said that.
Okay. Pick a realm that you want to know more about.
Okay.
And a number of these aren't necessarily the realm that they're in isn't spoken about, but there's certainly some set in Hammerhall, some set in Excelsior, some set out into the reaches, but some in Azir, some in Shyish, a lot of them in Shyish.
Yeah. I wonder why.
So there's a lot of
I
different
wish I had
places where
known
if you want to kind of dive into a location, and I mean, especially if you're doing skirmish or campaign, picking a setting like this and it'll dive you right into something that you could use. So that's where I would start, maybe if I'm forced to pick something different than what somebody else on the podcast said.
That's how podcasts work.
Yeah, that's why we go first. I go second. Yeah.
Rule of threes.
All right, so start with location, and by the time you listen to this, there'll be a spreadsheet on our website.
Sure. I mean, I didn't say it, so I'm not allowed.
themortalrealms.com/ Malign Portents spreadsheet lookup.
I mean,
That
do
sounds
you want
like
it to be that long?
address.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
/ Malign Portents.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I guess. Again, dear listener, I did not agree.
But I mean, so anyway, so some of the things it's I think there's a number of ways to approach it, start to finish, find the pieces that you're interested in. We're going to be talking about some themes here in a little bit, and so if there's some themes that interest you, hopefully we'll have a number of stories for you to start with.
Sure. Yeah. Agreed. And you're right. Being able to pinpoint the bits and pieces or factions or areas would be very helpful for someone to pinpoint. So we'll try and put up a resource to help people find the things that they are interested in. I guess it's looking at that list of stories. I wouldn't find it daunting because I would want to read every little single bit. But for somebody coming into it,
I mean, and everybody is you.
Sure. I often project.
I mean, I hope.
I can't help it.
I would love it.
The world would be a better place if that was.
imagine they're all errands.
But yeah, no, things like that would be daunting. So I think we've all given you great advice. Some better advice than others. But I think all three of us do recommend that folks get as much as you can out of them. Dig into
It's free.
Yeah, they're very free.
Yep.
Super free.
It's in an easy to find place and look through place. Like
Sure.
it's the website's real easy to navigate through. And there's very enjoyable stories.
Very well written. Like,
Yep.
In fact, I don't think they attribute a lot of them.
Well, I think, and some of them are not they're Black Library authors. Most of them, I think, are their community team and other people on the staff.
Sure. Like the
Yeah.
background writers and things.
I believe it's almost all the background writers, but there are a few Black Library in there.
Hey,
From what Phil Kelly mentioned.
hey, G-Dub, like slap some names on them. I want to give kudos as necessary.
I asked that already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked that on Warhammer Live. He's like, it's kind of everybody, and they all collaborated too. So it's like, I have this idea. How do I do this? We'll all kind of do this together.
Sure, but like we do that too, and Eric still takes credit for all of it. Like,
well, but that's
I don't take it.
don't know.
It's given.
it's freely given. I did notice you get a
When
sweet.
you put your face up forward.
I did notice you get a sweet.
He's
you got a
his
sweet
face
chair
up forward right now. I mean, legitimately.
Yeah, Aaron, you want that? You want that spot?
This is my awful side too. Right.
So go check them out, malignportents.com, and our joke at the front with the saying Malign Portents in different ways is because when it first came out, none of it, we couldn't remember the phrase Malign Portents.
Yeah, it's tricky.
No.
It was a hard one, but now rolls off the tongue.
Etched into my brain.
It is a special, meaningful time for us now.
Sure, yeah. Exactly.
And which is also different, is different than other campaigns that they've done. Like they had a Malign Portents like global campaign.
Oh, yeah.
They had we put on a coalescence event in March.
Sure.
And so and it's culminating in something pretty big. So that's pretty cool. All right. Should we go spoilers? Spoilers. No,
Spoilers.
it probably wouldn't be good to do the tear off pants right now.
I don't.
Especially since you're not wearing
Those don't
tear
look
off
like-
pants.
Sure, okay.
You can't put them on. And that'd be
All
a
right.
problem.
That's one spoiler that we don't want to reveal.
I was just meaning it'd be easy to tell. Anyway,
Oh, video wise.
revealing.
Is he wearing pants? All right, well, I can't listen.
So
Next episode.
spoilers.
He's so happy he's
Let's
not
talk
here.
about favorite stories.
Deal.
Want to go first?
Okay, Paul, you can go first.
Do
Is
it.
that okay?
Yeah,
All right.
but
As
make
long
it
as there's
worth
no
it.
more worms.
There's no more worms.
Okay.
Murmurs? Maybe even more worms.
No more
All right.
worms.
I'm going to read the first sentence because it's cool. All right.
We'll be the judge of that.
What's the story called?
It is called... Download this story. No, The Hangman's Curse.
Ooh, spooky.
Ooh.
Lord Slogus leant on his bubotic hammer and breathed a bubbling sigh of satisfaction. All right. Because there's a real cool opening. To me, as kind of always, it reminds me of a bit. This one is a single piece model. The dwarf model, where he's got both hands on top of the hammer, the dwarf lord. It's kind of a cool image to me. But Lord Slaugus is this character who is a Blight King, and it's a really cool story, and I really, really enjoy it for a lot of different reasons. One of them is that he's just kind of a normal guy, right?
Well, I mean, he's got a bunch of crap growing on him, and
yeah, but like he's a normal
people.
Blight King. He's he's not a mover or shaker.
He's not a Blight Lord or a Lord
it
of
could be a
Blights?
Blight Lord, but like he's taking over this city that we have not heard mention of before, and I don't believe we'll hear mention of before. Right, the civilization that he has taken over is Gokoria,
and that name's going right out the window as soon as he has anything to say about it.
Yeah,
what? What's wrong with Gokoria?
You don't think he's going to change it?
Well, he already uses the language.
Okay,
so I think he might preserve it.
Okay,
but spoilers, he won't. So basically, the reason I really enjoy this story is because this is a moment in time, but it actually talks about this vast history of him, Lord Slaugus, conquering Gokoria. And Gokoria is a free people's civilization. He is finishing, as it were, this final battle. And he comes back and he walks through the ruins of this civilization, which is just a really cool image, and talks about all of this Nurgle growth and Nurgle destruction that has come through, and how he's contaminated the whole area, the whole people. And they're bringing back these bodies to become death's heads in his orchard. It's very much, from the very beginning, an entire purview of destruction. Everything has been destroyed, right? He has destroyed everything about Gokoria. He has destroyed their hope. He has taken their language. He has taken their people. He has taken their cities. He has taken everything. He is this unstoppable tide of Nurgle power, basically.
Now you're bumming me out. Like, ugh.
Well, but that's kind of the theme of these stories, and it's
Gokoria.
Yeah, well, Gokoria's dead, so
talking about a bummer. Like,
so that's fair, but so he's taking these bodies and his warband back to him to a place called Leper's Wood, and Leper's Wood is his base of operations, and it is the vast central basis of his Nurgle power. It says it's the first place he conquered, and it's where he grows his own death heads. He has made it into his own Nurgle's paradise. And as he crosses the hill to come into view, it becomes very obvious that something is wrong. And this is the first time that I remember reading about somebody who is of chaos, of Nurgle, and it says he is shocked, right? Like, Nurgle doesn't get shocked because they don't care about death. They care about the cycle. Why would they be shocked? But the shock is something is wrong. And that something is the ceasing of the cycle. Death is fine. Rebirth is fine. It's the stasis.
Bet
right?
you're wondering how I got here.
Exactly. Right? Standing on the hill. Bet you're wondering how I got here. Standing on the hill outside of Leper's Wood. And it's dead. Right? But it's the difference. It's the clarification. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about this story. It's the clarification that it's not the death. It is the sterility. It is the nothingness of it.
Sure.
If I'm going to borrow from the Never-Ending Story. It's the nothing.
I'll try you.
But he goes down into the wood, and he ends up being taken over by these night haunts, as it were. This death force. And he is separated from the rest of his warband. And he goes in and he finds his death's heads, the people who are hanging to be ripened as death's heads, being taken over by undeath. And it just drives him to rage. Like, it drives him into a very cornate sense of being.
It would drive anybody crazy, though. Like, the same would happen to you. Can you blame him?
I don't know. I think I could hold my own in a forest full of corpses coming back to life.
Oh, yeah?
I feel like, wouldn't be the first time.
We've all been there, yeah.
All right, people, you got to take him up on his challenge and find a forest full of corpses. So
We know I was kidding, right?
Yes,
We
just
don't-
kidding. Just kidding. So, end of the story. Spoilers. Lord Slaugus is unable to overcome, and as finally the mists part, his warband sees him hung as a death's head upon his own tree, but he is dead. His skin is turned white, and he has realm stone trickling out of his mouth from the realm of Shyish.
Gross.
And that was the cool thing for me, is that realm stone had become a specific thing, right? We've heard about realm stone before. It's very much seemed very similar to warpstone from the old world. It was this magic stone that you find that has powers. But here, the realm stone is particular to Shyish, and the realm stone is sand.
Sure.
And of course, it's an amazing image of the sands of time running out, right? And like that is what this realm stone is about. Especially if you read the Malign Portents story in the book, it really brings to very specific relevance exactly how powerful this stuff is, especially when he has something trickling out of him. It is almost as if the realm stone itself is what killed him.
You know, they say it does get everywhere.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, and I think the stone does. I mean, the power of realm stone is it pulls your life force. It sucks you. It drains you. A mortal cannot hold a stone very long, and that's why. And even in the Malign Portents story, spoilers. The skeletons, and I think we got a video about this in the Malign Portents stuff early on
when they were like announcing the fork, like around that time.
The Harbingers. And where we've got these skeletons marching from the edge of the realm towards the center of the realm, each one holding one grain of sand.
One single grain.
Because even an undead skeleton can't last long with, can't hold that much and survive. So what I liked here was the introduction of Nurgle and Death as antagonist and protagonist throughout this. And there's a number of stories. There's probably more than a handful of stories that are Nurgle versus Death. We get to meet Horticulus.
Yeah, and the cycle interrupted, which I covered in the lightning strike.
Yep. And Rodigus is here, and they're talking about, and what's interesting, you talked about that transition, is that they're in the realm of life, and that's what a lot of the Realmgate Wars was about, was the realm of life, and Nurgle had spent time there, but now Nurgle's turning his eyes and his servants towards Shyish, and these document that kind of that transition, which is and those two as obviously life and death, like Garan versus Shyish was an obvious one. It made sense, but Nurgle versus Death is the twisted kind of mirror of that.
Yeah, exactly.
I definitely saw it, and I get it, and it was cool to see. Yeah, that juxtaposition.
Sure. I mean, and I think we've already alluded to it, but like those two next to each other are Nurgle's deal, right? So if for every desire or attention that he was giving the realm of life, he probably equally cared as much about the death side of things. Whether or not he was able to get a foothold there is up for debate. So obviously that he would be drawn there as well, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and like you said, there's a bunch of different stories that stand out. So I really like adding character to what could be, I don't know, when you're dealing with death, it could be sort of a sterile conversation, or the characters can be kind of sterile if you're not going to be dealing with, the higher echelons, the lords, the Mortarchs, and so on and so forth. So it's fun to see a very characterful army from the Nurgle side of things, to see like the jovial, like happy-go-lucky folks tackling not only just the sterile part of death, but like the even the emotionless sterility of the death as well. Is a good way to. Whereas
life and Nurgle's a perversion, but it kind of there's a parallelness to them.
Sure.
Whereas Death is the opposite of Nurgle.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, and so you almost get a better sense of the wretchedness of Nurgle when you set it next to the sterility of
the
death.
Overabundance. Yeah. And that's one of the last things that was really, I think, well done in this story, is that there were Blight Kings that were killed in the battle, and it talks about how they left the bodies in the field because they would sow Nurgle's blessings into the land. And when we finally see Lord Slaugus, he is like, his wounds are weeping. He's still a Nurgle soldier, and it's dripping into the soil, but the sand has stopped it. Right? Even in his death, he cannot move forward. It is literally it is the worst possible death for someone of Nurgle.
And we also covered Nagash, Undying King, over Malign Portents, which was Nurgle's forces trying to get into Shyish and claim a foothold. And
a lot of those themes hold true for that book as well.
Any last pieces or comments on this particular story? This one I think defined a lot of Malign Portents in a lot of the big theme of Nurgle and death.
Yeah.
Well,
it was a good one to lead. Good one to be one of the early ones to sort of, like you said, set the stage for what we're going to be dealing with. Yeah.
Well, it was number 3, and I like that it assumed that you had some knowledge from reading Malign Portents, right? Like the first story assumed that you had some knowledge from reading Blight War. The second story did not have that as much, and the third story assumed that you read Malign Portents, but it added to it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what was really cool. It didn't just take the story that we had before and continue on with one of the characters. This is a different character we hadn't been introduced before, and he's taking the theme and moving it forward.
Yeah.
Yep. Where do you want to go next?
All right, I'll talk about mine. Mine's a little one called, let me pull it up right here. It's called The Price of Apotheosis.
Like $70.
Give or take. Yeah. Well, if you pre-order, it's 10% off.
Can you get it at Walgreens?
No. You have to get it through your friendly local game store or GW retailer.
Can I get a subscription to it or prescription to it?
It's late. I'm not thinking off the cuff right now. Let me just talk to you about the story.
Cool.
So for you folks listening at home, if you don't know what Apotheosis is, then you obviously have not been following Age of Sigmar. But we're dealing with, since the beginning of the game, or since the beginning of the lore, the background, we've been having to learn piece by piece about how the Stormcast operate, how they come into being, and one of the big mysteries, or big sort of gaping hole in what we know how they operate and how they come into being. I just said that. Is how
what makes the Stormcast?
Yeah, exactly. How the reforging process works and how they're created. We've since found out that there's this anvil of apotheosis where somehow, in some way, they're forged and they're beaten into the honed killing machines that they are today. But as we all know, that process tends to take something from the Stormcast, or sometimes give them additional abilities, but it changes them beyond just turn them into big hulking armored dudes. And this story stood out to me because
dudettes.
And dudettes, yes, correct. It starts to allude to a more not sinister, but a gaping hole in the process that we want to find out more about. So what we're going to find out in this story is basically who watches this process and what this Stormcast take on it is. So we're going to be following the thought process of, where is his name? Cavastus 7 Cents, which is a cool last name.
7 cents, none the richer.
Yeah, ain't that?
So
Ain't that
good.
no, is that what you were doing? Oh God, man, guys, it's late. 2 kids. So furthermore, there's another introduction. One of the first introductions to the Sancrosanct chamber. So he's a Sancrosanct dude who's standing guard outside the Anvil of Apotheosis, and he's listening in on just I think a nameless Stormcast getting reforged. And we sometimes, I think in some of the stories we've seen a couple people get reforged, or maybe the steps soon after, where they're getting their armor attached to their bodies.
Yeah, in some of the Vandus stories, he's in there. He's feeling his armor come back together, that kind of stuff. Gardas is in kind of the locker room, kind of going through some memories shortly afterwards.
But we don't often get a sense of, you're not often in the moment or the early stages of the painful part of the reforging process.
The upload.
Yeah, we most definitely have not gotten this viewpoint before.
Yeah, exactly, and especially from somebody who kind of knows more of what's going on than maybe the person who's getting reforged. So that's a new perspective that I think we've been waiting to see.
Yep.
A lot of people have been wondering how this works. So he's standing outside the room in which the chamber in which the anvil of apotheosis exists. Someone's getting reforged, and he's hearing every little bit of it. There's a lot of hammering, as you might expect when we're dealing with our Stormcast, and a lot of cries of anguish. This is not an easy process. It's probably pretty painful, is the gist that we're getting. And alongside his perspective, we're also sort of getting a glimpse into the mind of the person who's getting reforged. And this individual at first is sort of going through the regular steps of I'm serving Sigmar. Where's our fun quote? I fought, I was reforged. I fought, I died, I was reforged. But then a little bit of doubt starts creeping into this individual's mind. How did I die? How did I get here? And so he has some piecing together some memories of what happened to him. My skull was caved in. I was cleaved by an axe, and so on and so forth. Not pleasurable memories by any stretch of the imagination. Nobody wants to remember that. But it's because of those hints or tidbits you start to realize that there's some cracks in this process. Time goes on. Again, this is not a quick process either. And as our main character sort of listens in, this person who's being reforged starts picking up bits and pieces and more of what happened when he died. He was in Shyish. He was facing the horde of the undead, and it's not just the nameless, faceless undead that I think a lot of us end up seeing. Not just generic skeleton 1, generic skeleton 2, but he actually starts to recognize, in the past, he starts to recognize these people that he's finding. Turns out, I know these folks, and they aren't too happy. To be clear, I wouldn't be too happy either if I were dead. But
so, pop quiz hot shot, which is worse, being in a forest where all of your decorative corpses come back to life, or being in a room where you realize everybody because you lived here once and they're all coming back to life, coming at you.
Can I say neither? I don't want to do either of those.
So I'm gonna throw.
But it's a pop quiz. What do we do now?
I'm gonna throw a question in here, right?
Hit me. Don't literally hit me.
Pop quiz. Say pop quiz hot shot first.
So pop quiz hot shot first. So
I am flattered. I like being called hot shot.
Fair enough. So there's an interesting little twist here to me when you're talking about this, right? He's like, these are people I know. And he starts to talk about how they are angry with him for not being with them, right? For not saving them. That's one of the main parts of the story, right? But from what we know of undeath, right? And I'm going to go back into the old world just for clarification, right? Nagash does not raise a soul. He raises the body, right? Now, Tomb Kings raise the soul and the body.
Yeah, okay.
So
I don't think we have any of those answers from this.
Well, I agree, but what I'm saying is that from everything that we know, Nagash just raises the body.
And he steals the soul.
So he steals the soul and raises the body, right? So my question is this reforged Stormcast literally going crazy? Because he sees these bodies and then assumes he knows the spirits and that the spirits are angry with him. That's a completely different perspective than we've had in Age of Sigmar, because that, as far as we know, doesn't exist. Now, we did get a bite of that in Nagash, the Undying Lord, where we hear about Tamara von Drac and her brother, who is a wight that she raised, who still has his soul. But this is a completely different situation.
Sure.
And so the question is the Stormcast who's being reforged insane?
I personally don't think so. I think you can raise the body, he can recognize the body, and they could just be generally angry. And maybe he's reading too much into why they're angry at him. So I think that maybe is just as likely. But I mean, nothing you said is impossible.
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility of. Crazy's not a term that's useful in terms of like diagnosing somebody. Like from what we read, he's got PTSD. He's in a situation where he's seeing if he's recognizing people. But you also these memories, the way memory works, jostled up with different realities, and if you got these things mashed together, it could be mistaken. So this is all a perception or an interpretation of reality, and I'll add a layer. This is the mortal realms, so that
TM.
reality. Who knows? Like it could be somebody playing a trick on him. It could have been like they don't go into that. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, it could have been the bodies of people he knew, but a different spirit inside of it. I don't know. I think the focus on this is that this is not. He's being reforged, and those memories are coming up and causing anguish.
Sure.
And they're trying to describe what kind of situations would make this person be traumatized in this situation.
Sure. And if you're already traumatized by the whole event of being reforged, and like you have to vent your, anger or frustration in a particular direction, it may be a logical conclusion to be like, all right, well, I'm mad at Sigmar for putting me through this because he made me leave my people. So you could start piecing together, or he could start making a lot of assumptions that aren't necessarily there too.
We had some cases too where in the process of getting taken up the first time, these heroes are in the midst of battle, or they're seeing their loved ones die in front of their faces. And so there could be that memory.
Yeah.
And they could then be fighting. I remember when Vandus came the first time in Gates of Azir, and he saw the first human that they made contact with. He's like, she reminds me of somebody.
Sure.
So I think he was overlaying some of his memories of people he loved onto this person in front of him. So I think could be a literal. It could be memory mashup.
Or it could be someone who's hitting him in the head with a hammer repeatedly, and like you're going to start remembering all sorts of crazy stuff. Then.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not crazy.
It could be REM sleep, where your brain is just throwing away information and it comes back to you as dreams.
That's a new take on reforging that I have not heard before. REM sleep. All right, add that to the list of how reforging works. So we sort of alluded to the rest of how this story goes, but
I was trying to think of a REM song.
Oh, sure.
Swimming.
It's not the one I said.
So
you just said our run song. I sang it.
So he starts to devolve quite a bit as the time goes on. He starts, whether or not he's projecting or this is actually the case, he remembers that when he most recently died, he saw this undead horde. He recognized the undead. Apparently he'd been snatched from their mists, presumably, if he's to be believed. And because of that, particularly like powerful emotional anguish, the reforging isn't going even as well as it could, regularly go for something that oftentimes is pretty traumatic to begin with. Because it ends up escalating such that eventually, and this is my favorite part, the doors of the chamber burst open, and his very, I don't know if it's his soul or what is it or what have you, but the electric power of him, electric essence rockets out and takes the form of a lightning geist. What
coolest combination of two words ever.
Right, absolutely.
What?
Where's the model, G-Dub? Where's the model?
Do you think anybody is in Azerheim going, hey, what's the Lightgeist around here?
I should hope so. The cultural Lightgeist?
Yeah.
Is that what you're getting at? Okay, perfect.
Sorry, cultural helped.
Sure, I'll play ball with you. So yeah, it bursts out into the chamber, and it just shows what my dude's name Kavastas. This energy bursting out sort of goes to show or proves why we have somebody watching this process outside, because he plants his staff very Gandalf-esque. He might as well have said, "You shall not pass," and tries to use
you shall go back.
Go become a Stormcast. So he uses his magic to try and match wills with this sort of wild carnage induced lightning geist and sort of drive him back into the anvil of apotheosis, which spoilers, he does after sort of a battle of electricity. Yeah, and that's the end of the story. Well, actually, basically is. So he is able to do what he's set off to do and force it back into the chamber, where the doors slam shut and the smiths are able to rein it in and actually reforge it back into your telltale drone of a Stormcast. And so he pops out the final product, pretty devoid. I mean, as far as we can tell, in one sentence, devoid of any emotion. I fought, I died, I was reforged. So mission accomplished. The reason I like this is because it shed some more light on the reforging process. I'm not necessarily a Stormcast player.
Are you
generally?
You player?
Well, I'm not so much. I don't know that I'm
Don't hate the
anything.
player, hit the game.
Yeah.
Wait, no. Don't hate OS.
Yeah,
That's
don't
not
hate-
good.
No, come on, you're supposed to love it. But it's even so. I think it's a mystery or a puzzle to be solved or cracked that I think a lot of people are interested whether or not you play Stormcast. I think it's one of the main inherent mysteries in the setting. I think what we learned gives a good jumping off point or sort of contributes to the mythology behind how this process would work. I loved seeing. I think it's probably the first visual of a sacrosanct chamber Stormcast. So it gave us some insight as to
two.
Well, technically, we had the Lord Ordinator, who's a sacrosanct.
Oh, okay, touche.
But the first actual sacrosanct
Yeah,
magician.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good
Wizard.
deviation. But it gives us a sense of how
Lord Arcanum.
these folks are being used when not on the battlefield, which I always like to see, because not everybody's fighting all the time. And lightning guys are sweet, and that's why I was into it. What'd you guys? Did you guys like it? Were you guys fans?
Yeah, I got a very strong vibe of Ghostbusters.
Sure.
And like don't cross the streams because he was talking about how the lightning was like locking it together and forming him back into the form of a man
Sure.
and throwing him in, right?
Form of an ice bucket.
Yeah, and then spoiling it, like he throws him into the anvil of Apotheosis and the doors close.
He said
right?
that.
I know.
You didn't.
But it reminded me of, as we get farther into the Soul Wars, of the spirit, the Night Haunt, who has the soul trap that can trap the Stormcast, because that's another story we go on to later, right? So we have this idea of the Lightning Geist being something you can catch. And it's introduced here in the Anvil of Apotheosis, but then it's expanded upon in a later story with the Night Haunt having this ability as well. Excuse me. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I was really fascinated by the idea, and he specifically says that that part of the Lightning Geist, the I can't go on, was removed. Right? It specifically states that that part of him was removed.
Sure.
So the reforging is not a remaking, right?
Yeah.
It's an edit.
It's an edit.
Yeah.
They are removing parts of the soul.
Impurities, some might say, if we're sticking to the
right?
forging.
But the person who they are is being removed. And there we get an explanation for why they are becoming automatons.
Or some of the nurture and the
forgetting,
experience.
Right? It's not because they're forgetting. It's not because something is wrong with the process necessarily. It's because they are intentionally removing things that do not make them useful.
It's not a
I think
feature.
it's one begets the other. I think there is something wrong with the reforging process. Two things that in the other Sacrosanct story called Sacrosanct, Sigmar says, "Go find the cure." That there's something wrong. Phil Kelly in a interview on Stormcast specifically said they went they shipped too soon.
Yeah.
That Chaos was about to kill, like specifically, I think was about to win that kind of tipping point and just be lost.
Sure. And
he had to ship the Stormcast into the realms before the process had been perfected of reforging. And so on one hand, there is a flaw in the reforging, which I think begets that trauma.
Sure.
That probably is painful and in and of itself causes like the soul to reject the process. And so therefore the Sacrosanct Chamber has to edit, has to enact kind of that, you know what I mean? So like, I think there's both, and there's a incomplete process and there's a QA decision on Sigmar's end that is also doesn't feel totally right as a result of that.
It's an imperfect solution to a process that is imperfect.
Well, and this is, to that point, the Malign Portents story gives us the sense. In when Age of Sigmar first released, we have these gleaming knights, and you said they are the center of the story. Whether you are a Stormcast player, whether you are a free people looking at these giants made of lightning and gold, whether you are Chaos thinking of these as, oh no, there's this wall that we can't get past of Sigmar, Sigmarite. If you're orcs, being like, that's where the best fight is.
Yeah.
Like they're the template which everything else is compared now. So there's that element, and they're this gleaming hope.
Sure.
And people have talked about Age of Sigmar being this hopeful thing, but we also see through these stories that there's a dark side, that there's something not perfect about the Stormcast. So, and I think these stories talk about that imperfection.
True. And another reason why I like this story is this is a hint, or a very obvious hint, that there is going to be a reckoning. There's going to be more to come. This is going to come to a head in some capacity. Otherwise, I don't know that it'd be particularly like compelling, knowing that it's got to lead somewhere. Like, it
either a cure or a lightning geist gets out and or a bunch of them get out and screw with his ear.
Yeah, exactly. So it's telegraphing something important, and it gets me on the edge of my seat. I'm excited to see where it goes.
So there's another really cool small little detail that I really appreciated. That was a really well written. They mentioned that there are 6 smiths that are hammering this soul back into place, right? And they have a sound effect for the swinging of the hammer, which is kring, right?
Yeah.
And after the lightning geist is thrown back into the anvil apotheosis, and they start hammering him back again, they write kring 6 times. But each time it is spelled differently, and it refers back to a previous statement in the story about how Cavastus can recognize the swing of each of the 6 smiths, and he can recognize which one is swinging.
Nice.
So,
oh man, that is a hot take.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, no.
I was just like, oh, that's awesome. I looked at it and was like, wait, that two has 2 R's, this one has 2 I's, this has 2. Yeah.
I didn't notice that. That's good.
Yeah.
There are a number of other stories that highlight kind of this darker side of the Stormcast from early on. Sure. I think another one that kind of hit the community hard when it came out was the story about a man, and his son was sick with the plague, and there'd been a number of things out, and he heard the we could hear this stuff coming, or these monsters coming, or this noise coming from somewhere, and it was coming upon them. And the final piece of it is he's backed into a corner, and a white armored Stormcast comes in
to save him, right? Yeah.
To end him.
Oh no.
There's another story where the Stormcast are fighting for the I'm trying to pull this up, are kind of fighting to help save a city. Like they're clearing out the chaos, the Nurgle, all this kind of stuff. They finally get like the last remnants, and they fight them into the city, and then they lock the city from the
just to save them, right? Just save them,
to burn it to the ground with everybody inside.
I'm sensing a trend here. Man.
So there, when you're dealing with Nurgle, so there's this space where, like, if this contagion, like, we're not dealing with just like the plague.
No,
we're dealing with Nurgle,
the father of all plagues.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so letting any of that poisoned human or any other kind of being survive means that you're giving Nurgle a foothold.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that echoes through a number of these stories about what Sigmar's take is. And we talked about this I don't know when we did that last episode before, about, is Sigmar a tyrant?
Oh sure. That's a couple episodes ago.
And it was just kind of like, like when you're a god and you're dealing with what's best for all of the realms,
bigger picture, big ticket items.
Does the survival of a single city matter that much?
Sure.
Right. But when you tell these stories, and it doesn't matter to that one person, we read Path to Glory.
Yeah, that's the one I think we talked about.
Yes. Yeah. In Path to Glory, when you have people on the ground who are like, why did Sigmar choose them and not us?
Sure.
Or whatever, then it's easy to see how, though, that creates its own foothold too.
True. And it leads to, bolstering the enemy's forces in a different way that maybe you don't necessarily intend.
Death at the Door was the one where the Excelsior Knight
kicks it in and
kicks it
saves
in.
that guy and his
No,
family. Yeah.
no, kills him.
See, I just never finished them. They're so long. I never get to the end. So like I just assumed.
So I have one last thought on the story that we covered.
I have a last thought too.
It was elucidated by my recent trip. So if Kavastus knows the sound of all 6 hammers, right? He knew the sound of the hammer that let the lightning geist escape, right? Or the last strike before it was freed.
That bastard.
Well, what it means is that is one of the 6 smiths the imperfection? Are they literally leaving to go find the cure, and the disease is one of the 6?
Are you saying it's Gotrek?
I don't know what
is
it
it.
is.
Is it Grimnir?
Is it Tamra von Dreck or
Well, one of the 6 smiths
I know
is
I'm giving you a
not
hard time.
true. To
Vanis was a
whatever
smith.
Yeah.
Sure, that's true. All right,
I
so
mean, it's a very common.
we
name
have it
in America.
documented that is your theory.
That's my theory.
Let's see how it
I have
plays
to have a
out.
conspiracy theory
Absolutely.
somewhere, right?
Hashtag Paul
That's
Paul
kinda
theories.
yeah.
A really fun aspect of the Malign Portents. This is another kind of pinpoint in our community history. Was that same story, or I think it was the at the door, Death at the Door, where we get farming introduced to Age of Sigmar for the first time.
Finally,
What?
yeah.
What?
I've been so hungry for that farming.
How
I'm
did-
so hungry for those ears
How do people
of
even
corn
eat-
filled with
Yeah.
teeth?
But it also, I think, rang true for the Synchrosake Chamber in that's like a non-war job
Sure, yeah.
that the Stormcasts were created for. These priests, or wizards.
Guarding the anvil and building weird towers out of magic, and
Yep.
the only non-combat things.
Yep. Yeah, the ordinators.
Weird tower is built out of
Also
magic.
true. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So in these stories, we do get a lot of, ground level, everyday. We get these peeks into what people do
Yeah.
when they're not waging war
Sure.
or raging war.
Yeah, and another
Can't be doing that all
interesting
the time.
aspect is that we have released into the mortal realms at this point the people who know the truth about the Stormcast and know that this is the cost.
That's not what I was talking about.
Well, but I think this is what the Sacrosanct Chamber is about, right? They've been there. They've been in Azir. They know that there's a problem. They know that this is how it works. And they're being released into the mortal realms. So now we have a question of, if somebody goes into the mortal realms and sees a problem and knows how it's going to be resolved and is like, wait a minute, this is wrong. How do we deal with that?
Sure.
I think the answer is going to be farming.
Yeah. I mean,
Ears of corn
it's the great
that
equalizer.
become teeth,
Farming.
right?
Yeah.
The great equalizer is
Were
part of
there
it.
any other stories that had common jobs or like everyday
Yeah,
stuff?
clockmaker. There was one about a clockmaker.
That one, Clockmaker showed up twice.
Okay.
There was
Yeah.
a story about a boy who.
Well, I would say the
What a girl.
cog.
Well, now I'll get to
maker.
that.
No, the cog maker
No, so there's
ties
two.
into the mortal, just to the spell with the wheels of time, the
I see what
chromatic
you're saying.
cogs.
I see what you're saying. But there's 2 clockwork stories, and then there's also 2 cog stories, or mentions of cog forts. So let's get to my favorite story.
Sure.
What?
Hit me.
You have a favorite?
I had a favorite story,
I don't believe you.
Plain favorites.
and this one was called The Offer. And what was cool about this story? Oh man!
Somebody bought a house, right? Then you put in an offer. Was it accepted? I don't know.
Yes, it was.
I like the low ball 'em. That's
Yeah.
what I do.
Take it or leave it.
Mhm.
It left it. Crap.
So the offer sets us was a twist in kind of how the story was told.
Sure.
So there's a lot of different ways to tell stories. Obviously, we're not going to go into all of those, but the author did something really different, and they posed it in terms of like a letter, a correspondence back from kind of the front line of somewhere.
And while you're reading, actually, that's a good point. We didn't really talk about that. Another unique part of the way that they're telling all these stories is that they're experimenting with different storytelling mechanisms, and even in these short stories, it's you're not getting sort of exclusively a first or a third person perspective. We're getting a sort of across the board, and this is one example of a sort of unique or different style of telling a story through letters.
Well, they kind of have touched on it a little bit in battle tomes, where they have those little box outs.
Sure, yeah.
And the little box out might be a letter, or it might be a story, or it might be a character. But like, those are like 3 paragraphs long, and these are like 2-3 pages long. And
Yeah.
like,
True.
yeah.
So this was written for the Lord General Estimion.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, everybody knows him, right?
Rolls off the tongue.
And let's see if it was. Do we get who it was written from?
Yes, me too.
Do you know it off the top of your head?
It's no, I don't. It's at the very end. It says it's labeled from your dear whatever. I thought.
Keep on going. I'll find it for you.
And no, I don't see it. And the person who's writing this is in charge of a cog fort.
Yeah.
Which, first of all,
wait, what? A cog fort?
Yep. So recently in Path of Glory, we found a cog city, which was a city that had a lot of moving parts, a lot of gears. It could change its. It could change its, as opposed to, its walls could move and swing and rearrange.
Its streets could rearrange.
Yep, and it was a big part, and we saw some of that in the Realmgate Wars around the All Points. There's some different cities that were built so that the walls could change and rearrange to frustrate siege. They break into one wall, it all changes, so they're kind of recontained kind of thing. And now this is a cog. This is a cog fort. And now a fort is something that's far away from a city, often kind of an outpost. But in this case, it moves. It walks around. And I'm sure there's many different ways. And this got my brain stirring of it could have legs. It could be, really tall. It could be really short. It could have wheels. It could, just do a bunch of different things. And they have a visual in there, so they had to push this fort further and further, and they were heading towards a specific realm gate into Shyish, and I had to study it. And there'd been some things going on, and they talk about having pushed the cog fort kind of pretty hard, made it, and so the engineers were happy to have the rest, etc. So you get this idea of. You think of like the movie Titanic. Sure. You get down into the bowels of the ship, where they're loading it full of coal and all that kind of stuff. And then, but they had lowered a drawbridge, and they sent out their scouts and that sort of stuff. And I mean, in my head, I was thinking, it could be like this lowering of a platform, yep, on chains and coming down. And so it's just some really cool visuals. And when they got there, they noticed some things. They and then were visited. So this letter back to General Estimion, Lord General Estimion.
Give him his due diligence. Good job.
Right. I mean, and we only know of generals in the Free People's armies. So maybe someday we're going to get a Lord General. So what he writes back is about this correspondence with this being that comes out of the gates. And at this point, it's only a few in, and we had just learned about the Harbingers. And so this is what we presume to be a Knight of Shrouds. And we know that the Knight of Shrouds gives this offer, which is, turn your back on your people and come fight for Nagash. And you'll be victorious. So what we learn is in other things is that Nagash is been robbed of the prime meat of human souls or more realm souls, and
like he wants to get his hands on like
the Stormcast. I mean, he's coming for us.
Sure.
I mean, I took the offer.
Wait, obviously, yeah. That's why he's over there. You're over there.
You were looking a little gaunt.
So
summoners.
So different thing.
Oh, sorry.
So Nagash is using the Knight of Shrouds, the many shrouded knights, to go out and try and find these souls, these heroic souls that are still alive, and take them before Sigmar can get them.
Sure.
So he's not just trying to go out and kill indiscriminately. He's trying to find specific key souls.
Yeah.
Prime soul meat.
Chef's kiss.
Yep. And so we get this offer, and he says we said no right away.
Very offensively, I might add.
We thumbed our nose.
Yeah.
Bit our whatever. Yeah. And so and then we noticed some things, like they started seeing, like things would rust and age too quickly. And then their fires went out.
True.
And they'd open up the fires and they found it looked like ash
Sure.
that had been cold for days.
Cold ash. Yeah.
Yep.
The worst kind of ash.
And here's something interesting because we get a similar story in Fire Slayer's Tale, where they talk about their inner forges kind of going out.
Yeah, that's kind of
and so an interesting kind of kill them from within. And the end of it seems to have been writing and collecting these. So you think if you're out in the front lines, you write a bunch and then you send them once you've got a number of them together, a journal of sorts. But you kind of see him devolving a little bit as he's writing, kind of giving in, weakening some things he's written and scratched off.
Yeah.
And then in the end, he's kind of says, I relinquished because everybody was dead.
Sure.
And, so I gave in, I gave myself over.
And that's the end of the story. Yeah. Or is it?
Is it? I don't remember now.
Oh,
you're making me doubt. What is the end of the story?
Well, he acquiesces. He says, "Yeah, I mean, I'm going to join."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and the dude says, don't think so, friend.
Yeah, you had your chance.
I gave you a shot, and I don't offer twice. I mean, it doesn't say that literally, but
nice.
I steal your. I didn't.
No, that was just fine because I was like, when I was rereading it, that's I was like,
and then everything tied it to the bird, and the bird flew away. But it was like, oh my goodness, you're like a dead bird. Why are you even flying?
So here's the offer. I'm gonna give this to you guys.
Please.
I'm gonna say no.
Wait.
I'm gonna say no.
I'm just gonna say yes, actually.
Woohoo!
Sorry. Here we go. You ready?
Hit me. Don't literally hit me.
No.
Nagash claims these lands. He has claimed all lands. As death shall always have its due. The dark gale rises. I offer you one chance, not two, but one. Give yourself over willingly. Serve and endure. Or refuse and die.
Oh, goodness.
I didn't realize that Pee Wee Herman was a Knight of Shrouds.
No.
That was great. That was great.
Sorry.
That took a turn.
I mean, I don't think... Why do we assume the Knight of Shrouds coming with throwing shade?
I am shades though. I will admit I'm coming at it with some preconceived notions about it.
Nagash claims these lands. I mean, what if it? I mean, he doesn't have to be mean about it.
No, I mean, in fact, you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar, and I think Nagash probably knows that.
It sounds more like Nurgle to me. I mean,
I don't know. He has zombies like flies. That makes sense.
So. Aaron,
I'm all in. Yeah, take me on this clown ride that you've got going on.
Cool.
No.
That sounds a little preconceived.
You're right.
Sounds like you didn't even actually listen to the offer.
No. What I did listen to
he's letting the messenger confuse
the description of the Knight of Shrouds that is in the new starter set for Soul Wars. Because he's a Knight of Shrouds and he's on horseback.
He's on a horse.
Boom. This is our description of it.
He's a pale rider. Yeah.
He is a pale rider.
I'm a pale rider.
Okay, don't stop. Do the whole thing.
That's all I got.
That was the whole thing right there. He didn't stop.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Pale rider is not an uncommon trope, right? So a couple of things. One, like I said, there's multiple cog related visualizations of free peoples.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the clockwork is to me, clockwork and cogs go hand in hand. So I think we're gonna get a free people, a cog themed, a mechanical themed free people release someday.
Sure.
Because there's been other themes, but nothing as strong as that's been come throughout.
And I have a very specific reason as to why I think that's true.
Because I said it?
It goes back to the Marsh Strider point that I made before. Because the Marsh Striders are mentioned in the short story about the Witch Hunter.
Sure.
But they're also in one of these Malign Portents stories. And in the Witch Hunter short story, which was released first, they're actual animals.
They're
or insects.
Yeah, they're
In the Malign Portents story, they're clockwork. So it's a change from what it was. So, obviously, maybe they died and they made their own version of it, but that's a significant change from what was already published to what was published there.
Yeah.
And that sounds like an awesome model to have released. Some Marsh Striders, a cog fort, you've got engineers, you've got these outriders on mechanical horses like we've already had. Anyway. There you go.
The problem with that is that you already had a Paul theory on this episode, so you can't. You have to pick one.
But I can't be predictable.
So
Fair.
my conundrum is I've already started thinking about how I would kit bash
What? No.
a mechanical cog army, and I'm feeling a little worried that I should just do no such thing. Because
It's never stopped you before.
No, it hasn't stopped you before.
no, that's true. But I think this was also this is Nagash's offer. I mean, we talked about how us death players really, shining and soaking it up in this waxing of Nagash. So that was the other part of this, is just that choice. Nagash is saying, join me or die.
Sure.
If you ask me, he's just trying to put together the Pantheon with him in charge.
Can you blame him?
Join me?
Yes.
Join me or die.
Yeah.
Come on over, or I'm going to kill you.
If you want a job done right, you got to do it yourself.
Yep.
Also, if we're talking about themes, this isn't the only story where the offer is made. There's the one where there's that guy who feels unappreciated and he's I don't know
what the hero of Glimsforge?
something like
Wait,
that. Yeah.
Glimsforge.
Yep. Which is also
In the
new
new
packet.
campaign and the new.
It's true, but just to talk about the offer,
goodness.
he feels unappreciated, especially when he's a free people soldier in some capacity, especially when compared to the Stormcast. There feels unappreciated, wants a little bit of that glory. His life is no better off, probably a little worse off because of this situation that he finds him in. Again, the offer is extended, and he takes him up on the offer. Yeah,
he's kind of like,
He
wow,
does.
this guy really appreciates me.
Some
sure,
sense.
yeah, flatterer.
Is he following me on Twitter?
Sure, let me check. Okay. He knows his stuff.
But yeah, so there's another one with a gladiator, where this being kind of tells him, hey, one last fight, and he thinks it is, and you'll have your freedom.
Mm.
And he thinks that, oh yeah, I'm a prize fight. I'll fight this guy. I'll beat him up, but he's like twice his size. He gets pummeled, choked out. He dies. His spirit rises up, and everyone's like, "Oh no, a Geist!" And he's like,
That's what I'd say.
"One last fight."
Yeah.
And he goes in, and so he becomes a night haunt for Nagash.
Spooky, scary.
Yeah. So, any other? I mean, were there any other themes in any of these kind of just things to pipe up about things that are interesting things you found throughout this?
Well, what we have a continuing theme of that we've had in all of our stories, pre-AOS, post-AOS, is that we have a whipping boy, right? And the whipping boy has always been, and apparently will continue to be, free peoples, right? It used to be the Empire, used to be Bretonnians or whatever, but now it's the free peoples. They just keep getting destroyed.
Sure.
And be like, even when they're changing sides, right? Like Nurgle still destroyed Gokoria, but then Nurgle got destroyed by the death. So you could say there was some revenge there because some of the undead were wearing the clothes of the Gokorians.
Sure.
Right? But
it's
the free people that get it bad at the end, right?
If you think about it, Nagash has the best retirement plan.
Just don't retire.
Well,
I meant not the retire.
Lay down.
Yeah. Get it? And if we're talking about
if you guys could leave, that'd be great enough.
Why don't you make like a tree? Get out of here.
Yeah.
But every one of these stories talks about how a free person doesn't get it well, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
With the offer, it talks about a free person not getting it well. With your story,
sure,
it's a free person who's being reforged into a Stormcast, and the part of him that is a free person is removed.
Yeah.
Right? They are our avatar into this world.
Sure, they're our stand-in for what's going on.
I would agree, but I would say the Malign Portents stories as a whole gave us other matchups that didn't include free people. So we did get, like you said, Nurgle versus Death, which there's certainly mortals in there, but not free people. There was a story of Death Mages versus Marathi and the Daughters of Cain. There's some cool. There's a lot of cool Daughters of Cain. There was a really cool story of how do we let them this cult of Cain in our society when they just murdered a whole bunch of people? Why are we sitting here negotiating with them, right? And they're like, we all hate chaos.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Right.
You hate
like murder
right,
ladies,
guys?
but like,
Enemies
but they're
closer.
order.
Sure.
Right.
They're order.
They want-
Like, they
they
want to
want-
build cities.
Yeah, they're in the book.
So they
They're in
can
the battle. So
Give people pendants so they can kill them. Like, that's good.
There was some Soul Blight and Stormcast.
Those
aren't armies.
There was some inner chaos stuff. Slanesh versus Dark Oath.
Sure.
That was pretty cool. A few Dark Oath stories. And then, again, the harbinger of chaos is the Dark Oath War Queen.
Warworm.
War Queen.
Personnel.
War Queen.
Y'all nailed it.
Mjolnir.
Mjolnir. What?
Meow.
We have 8 legs. I'm liking this.
Iron Jaws versus Idoneth Deepkin.
Sure.
Some cool matchup. Ironwood Arsenal versus Beastclaw Raiders, and then versus Death, because all that stuff. Zinch versus Skaven. That one was kind of mostly a Zinch monologue type of thing, and then all of a sudden a Skaven thing.
Monologue.
Skaven versus Skaven.
Sure.
That never happens ever.
I turn around.
Sneaky.
I don't want to.
So, I mean, yeah, one of the themes, if you want to call it a theme, is a lot of it highlights a lot of the
warfare.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the combats between a lot of these armies that don't necessarily take center stage, oftentimes outside of like their own battle tome. So it's a good glimpse to see the interplay between a lot of those areas.
And this is the perfect format for that. Like,
sure,
you don't need a big novel that highlights just one. Like, having a bunch of like quick hits that gives us a flavor of what those
lightning strike.
Exactly.
Man, I wonder if that's interesting. You might say that
it should be done.
I should do a video series called Lightning Strikes.
Well, especially considering how many like factions we're dealing with now. Like, I mean, the AOS has expanded the breadth of the types of factions they're dealing with, and so like we can't necessarily hit on all of them in a traditional format or a traditional sense. So this is an opportunity to do so in a very digestible way. If we're talking about other themes, another thing I like about it is given that we're talking about this stretches over a very set timeline in the lore or in the world that we're dealing with. So too does the recent Battle Tome releases that have come out. So when we're talking about the Nurgle one, we're talking about the Daughters and the Deepkin, and then obviously the Legions and Nagash. And around those releases, we got a set of stories that really highlighted those armies as well, to really show that this Malign Portents is over a course of a very set timeline. But then again, I said so too. Those Battle Tomes are pinpoints in those timelines as well, and they sort of match up. And so we got a lot of, if it's a theme, I don't know if you want to call it that, we got a lot of Deepkin stories around when the Deepkin got released. And so it really shines a spotlight on how they deal with this situation. Also with the Daughters, as we were just sort of talking about. So I love how they run in tandem. It really shows a unified storytelling mechanism. Vision, which we don't always get from GW. So I'll applaud it when we see it.
Any other
themes?
Themes?
You got any more in that handy dandy?
A lot of it is about the inevitability of death.
Oh, bummer again, man.
Right? But it's just how
I'm gonna live forever.
Well, but that's the point. You're not gonna.
You did. No, he accepted from Nagash's offer.
Sure. Plus, I'm
but you're gonna be dead. You're not gonna live forever. You're gonna be undead forever.
Pretty well so far. Okay, so
I don't know. If you look back on my history, I'm going great guns.
Yeah.
I mean, those are most of the themes. You can pick out those. There's almost a story for everyone. Swift Talker in there a little bit. Fire Slayers are in there a little bit. Ogres are in there a little bit.
They mentioned
Gargants, Grots, Gargants, Spiderfang.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that wasn't your favorite story.
It's a really good story, and I really liked it, but it didn't propel the storyline forward. It was a very slice of time.
Sure. Snapshot.
Right. It didn't have as many of the themes as much. It was, but it was definitely a snapshot of that army and that faction, what they're dealing with in the times.
It's the most fiction lore, I should say, that we have for the Spider-Fang.
That's probably true.
Flat out.
Yeah. So you're welcome.
Mm-hmm. That was awesome.
It's from them to you. Tied up in a bow.
Yep. Do we think that they're going to continue I mean, I know that Ficali said this is a finite.
Mhm.
Do we think we're going to get some Soul Wars a series of stories on the new Age of Sigmar website?
I don't know. I mean, I hope so. And if not, which I can understand why they wouldn't, I hope the next time or whatever the next storyline is that comes out, I hope they revisit it. And like, I don't know how to ensure that. Like, there's not something I can go buy and vote with my wallet.
Yeah.
But like, if anybody's listening, like at least from from this room's perspective, like I hope they continue to do so.
Yeah.
I think it's really effective, and it scratches that itch that maybe a novel doesn't, or a battle tome doesn't, or a campaign book doesn't as well.
No, I thought it was great. I would like it to continue. I don't know if it's possible for it to continue, but
yeah, it'd be a tall order to keep this running, like with the same quality that we've seen thus far.
Yeah, exactly. It provides a great narrative from this to that, right? And I think we're getting a lot of narrative from here forward, set up and played out in the books. Like, I think that's probably how it is going to be going forward, because we're going to have the battle tomes. We're going to have the started, like, what we really had to have, and I think why this was a thing, is we had to have a bridge from the story that was into the new AOS 2.0 book, right? We have a core book coming in a week. We don't have rules. We don't have 16 pages. We don't have a general's handbook alone. We have an exploration and a definition of the mortal realms. And I think we had to get more of an exploration of that done. And these stories allowed that to happen without releasing a book that would be immediately invalidated or immediately replaced, or right? Like, it provided something that could not be feasibly done with a product.
It was certainly the right format.
It was absolutely the right format for what they did.
Yeah.
And so that was awesome. But I can see how they would look at it and go, yeah, but we're not going to do that going forward because this was here because this did this.
Gotcha.
And now going forward, we don't need this. Or maybe we will at some other point in the future, but right.
Sure.
Yeah, I certainly didn't. I don't think that they'll keep it going indefinitely or constantly, because I think that's a lot of effort, and I think they probably put this together. Anyway, I don't know how they timelined this or project managed it.
It's a marketing tool,
but and part of me was thinking, yes, as soon as Soul Wars launch, we got the new website. Hopefully they'll do it again, because this was successful, and the way it's successful is people go and read them. If they digest them, maybe if they're clicking around, right? It's the are they engaging people? But there's two things. I think you're right. We didn't know that this was going to be a big transition into AOS 2, right? And setting up Nagash as the big bad for this next arc, which could be the next 3 years.
Sure. Yeah.
Also, Games Workshop never does the same thing twice. Which is okay, because I think one, they're always experimenting, they're always trying new things, and hey, let's do this. They may bring some of the things that worked, but they they're doing the Hammerhall Herald, which is kind of like these short little snippet things, but even a shorter form, which are interesting, and maybe they'll splatter in, every couple of weeks, maybe we'll get a story like that. But they're experimenting with other formats and other mediums, and they've got the Stormcast podcast. Excuse me. So I guess I was in the party of course they'll do it again because it's amazing. But now I do feel like maybe if they do it again, it'll be for another special occasion.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
I'm going to backpedal slightly.
But I based my whole argument on what you just said.
I know, which is why I'm going to backpedal. That's why I want to go last. I do know that they opened up for submissions for a Citadel Journal, which is something that they used to have, which is defined by short stories.
True.
Right? So this also could have been a setup to encourage you to subscribe to that and get more of these stories. It would be before it wasn't moving the storyline forward, because that's not what they did. But I could see that being the format for having this continue to go forward.
True.
Right? Which would be even paying for it much better than what we have.
Yeah,
right.
no, I agree. I mean, you're mentioning how they experiment and they throw things against the wall to see what sticks. So let's say this was an experiment. Hesitant to dive into this, but what would make this a success? Do you think? Like, we don't know what their metrics were, but like, how would someone even consider this whether or not this was a success or not? Like, what were they trying to accomplish, and do you think they did accomplish it with these stories?
I think it's an unmitigated success. Like, I'll just flat out say
Sure.
that.
Oh, sure. No. So the question is,
And the
what
metric
is
that
a
I would
success?
say
Yeah.
is that what they have done, right? Take everything else out of it.
Sure.
Take the moments of the community being able to enjoy it at the same time. Take out the reveals. Take out the snippets, right? What they have done is they have made a lore introduction to Age of Sigmar available to everyone on a website. So you want to get into Age of Sigmar? Here's a background for free. Just go ahead and read it, right? They have an existing library. Oh, you want to, like, we now have a resource. A free resource where any one of us can say, oh, you want to talk about Cogforts? Here, go read this story on the Malign Portents website.
Gotcha.
This is where it is. Right?
I think what you're answering is, is it successful in doing something?
Mm-hmm.
Is a different answer than was it for the time and energy they put into it? Did they monetarily?
Well, not necessarily. Maybe not monetarily.
Monetary is actually about it, because if it was monetary, then it would be free.
That's not true.
Yeah.
That's not true. You can engaging with social media has a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, was it successful in gaining the reaction that they wanted to do?
And whether what was the reaction in the first place?
And so the metrics you talk about are, did people visit the website more? Did that increase over the period of time of those stories coming out, or did it peter off? Right? Over 50 stories. When was the height of that? Like, I know that I stopped reading consistently probably about, let's see, there were 6 pages of stories. I probably page 3.
Sure.
So probably halfway through, I stopped reading them in the moment.
So we don't really know that your favorite one was your favorite.
Yeah.
What's that?
You're living. We don't even know that your favorite one was your favorite. You're living a lie.
I've read the other one since.
Oh, gotcha. Good job.
In bigger chunks.
Sure.
So then that would be another thing. Did people come back? Was there a lot of repeats? Did certain stories spike? Was there any traffic? So by creating a Malign Portents website, they can see traffic from Malign Portents website to the Games Workshop store, and to see whether or not that drove people to go and peruse the store.
Did that move the needle at all for a given?
So those are so you can certainly, get rewarded for free stuff. Like when you put out, but it costs them. They paid for writer time, and they paid for server time for the loads. I mean, when you're dealing with a website that has tens of thousands of viewers, your traffic load and has to be dealt with.
Sure, we're intimately familiar with that.
Yeah, traffic load spikes
all
on
the thousands of
themortalrealms.com, and I have to ping Aaron and say, hey,
we need more servers.
We
gotta get those servers.
We need more tubes.
Did you put the servers in?
Sure. I installed all of them on top of each other.
So that's what I mean. So I definitely agree with you. So 2 versions of success. Does it provide what you were saying? Is it does provide, and it continues the AOS kind of theme of having enough free stuff that the barrier to get in is low, and the chance of addicting somebody on the narrative, which we know is the most important part of all of this, and getting them into the game is successfully delivered. There's a lot of great stuff, especially partway through that video on how the realms, orbit each other. Like, people have talked about this, but I mean, besides introducing farmers, they introduced orbits.
Sure,
right?
That was the second most important thing they could have done.
It just brings it concrete, and you guys know that my theory on that is that's just the best way that our human brains would understand how those realms work.
Oh,
right?
Sure, it's beyond our
comprehension. It's not a literal, so on one hand, does it provide a great platform for introducing people? The answer, I think, in theory, from perception, is yes. Does that play out was it successful? I think what I would point to as a yes would be the new Age of Sigmar website.
Okay.
that
very similar.
that they're duplicating the Malign Portents website with the Age of Sigmar website. That's going to have that similar kind of entry, navigation, stories.
True.
Looking through the realms.
Sure.
So I think if Malign Portents wasn't successful, they may not have done that.
Gotcha. And so when we talk about whether or not they're going to continue that methodology for releasing these stories, if we think that maybe the website is an indication that somehow some part of it worked, maybe that also means that story delivery system also worked or accomplished what they hoped it did. And then that would give it a better chance for it to show up in the future, which I hope it did. I mean, if I had to go click around on the store and buy stuff, so be it to get it.
Yeah, I mean, and if we're talking from just a social media perspective, we've seen an escalation from the beginning of AOS to where we are now, right? It started out with Facebook pages, and it started out with the website. Then it was
from there,
right?
From there, social media. I'm like,
then we have more regular posts of what's coming up to far more daily posts to Malign Portent. Like they have escalated their engagement in social media.
And this is,
so
maybe people listening don't care about this, but the buzz or the mountain of content that's created in reaction to the Malign Portents stories, to the releases, has just increased. All of the podcasters talk about all these things. The YouTube community, there's been more videos. Videos on every single story, videos on every single hint that's come out. Their release schedule is perpetuating this machine of content. So every time they post something now, there's a dozen other people posting things that just broadcast it further.
Snowballs on top of it. So
True. Corpse balls.
Ooh, gross.
Sorry,
thank you. Yeah,
I try not to open my pitches with corpse balls. Finger food is no.
Let me hit you with an idea. Corpse balls.
Finger food.
Okay,
never mind.
Hey guys, it sounds like we like these MP stories.
Yeah.
Suffice it to say.
Go read them.
Sure.
And prepare yourself for what Games Workshop's going to do next, because it's probably not going to. You're probably not going to expect it.
Sure.
And it'll probably knock your socks off.
Keep you on your toes.
You know how hard it is to actually knock somebody's socks off? It's like almost impossible.
I don't know. My 3-year-old can't keep them on.
Especially not being knocked out of his socks, though. I mean,
it's time for our reforging. Like and subscribe our YouTube channel. Comment below. Leave a review for us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter. You can find us at Mortal Realms.
The Mortal Realms.
At The Mortal Realms on Twitter.
We changed it.
Davey, who's not here right now, send him a message on Twitter at red_Zeke.
Yeah.
Aaron, where do we find you?
You can find me at Josesos, at DOSACEOS. Is that it?
Do you want?
Say again?
Do you want to say again?
DOSACEOS. Yeah, that's how you spell
it.
Right,
that's
what I said last time.
Paul, where do we find you?
At PJ Shard.
And I'm Eric at Stone Monkey Gamer, and you can see more of our content, read, watch at our website, themortalrealms.com. And look forward to talking to you, seeing you, telling you more stories in the future.
We're going to do it at your guys' house next time.
It's time for reforging.
I just said that.
All right. Good night.
Peace. I don't know how to stop it.